I'd always prided myself on being a patient person, a partner who believed in trust and communication. But what was happening now, what I was experiencing in the deepest part of my gut, was testing everything I had believed in about love and relationships. The truth was laid out in front of me, and it was gut-wrenching, something I couldn't ignore, no matter how hard I tried. It all started a few weeks ago. My wife, whom I had been married to for almost 4 years, had become increasingly distant. At first, it was subtle, little things like her being distracted during dinner or zoning out when we'd talk about our plans for the weekend. But as time went on, I began to notice patterns that seemed too significant to be ignored. Her phone notifications became more frequent, but whenever I'd ask her about them, she'd either dismiss it with a laugh or tell me it was nothing important. She started going out more often without me, hanging out with her best friend Karen and a few other people from work. At first, I didn't think much of it. She had always enjoyed spending time with her friends, and it wasn't unusual for her to go out without me. But something started to change. The more she went out, the more she seemed to pull away. Her late nights became regular, and I could feel the distance between us growing. I started to feel a knot form in my stomach every time she would come home late, reeking of alcohol and with that look on her face, one I could never quite place. It was a look I'd seen before, and it always made me uneasy. It was the same look she'd wear when we first met, when she was hiding something. The difference now was that I had no idea what she was hiding. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, so I tried to stay calm, telling myself that I was being paranoid. I reminded myself that relationships go through phases, and maybe she just needed some space. I knew she had a demanding job and was under a lot of stress, so I gave her the benefit of the doubt. But when I came home early from work one evening and found her phone face down on the kitchen counter with a strange message on the screen, I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had always prided myself on trusting her, but that night, I broke my own rule. I picked up her phone. At first, I told myself I was just going to check to make sure everything was okay, nothing serious, just a quick look. But then I saw it. The message was from a guy I didn't know. "Can't wait to see you again tonight. We'll finish what we started." My heart dropped. I could feel the blood rush from my face as the words on the screen blurred before me. It felt as if my whole world was crumbling in an instant. The betrayal was staring me in the face, and I had no idea how to process it. I had trusted her. I had trusted her with everything, and now I didn't know what to think. I immediately called her, my voice shaking, trying to stay calm as I demanded an explanation. She was at work, so I left her a message, asking her to come home as soon as possible. When she called back an hour later, her tone was distant. Asked her about the message, and she brushed it off. "Oh, that's just someone from work. Don't worry about it, babe." But the way she said it, the hesitation in her voice, told me everything I needed to know. Something was off. Over the next few days, I tried to ignore my growing suspicion. I didn't want to accuse her without being sure, but my gut told me otherwise. The little details didn't add up. The late nights, the phone calls, the way she kept her phone with her at all times, never leaving it unattended, always making sure it was face down when we were together. Every time I asked her about it, she seemed irritated, defensive, and distant. The person I had married, the one who would stay up late talking to me, laughing and sharing everything on her mind, was slipping away. Finally, I reached a breaking point. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. My mind was spinning, and my heart was broken. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I texted her, demanding that we talk when she got home. The message was short and to the point. "We need to talk. I know what's going on, and I'm done pretending. Please don't lie to me." When she arrived home, her face was pale. She had that nervous look, the one she always got when she knew I was serious. I didn't give her a chance to speak. I confronted her right away. "I know about the messages, and I need you to tell me the truth. What's going on? Who is he? What's happening between you two?" She hesitated, her eyes darting to the floor, and for a moment, I could see the conflict in her face. Then, almost like a dam breaking, she admitted it. "There's someone else. I didn't mean for it to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant for this to go this far." I could feel the tears well up in my eyes as she spoke. The words were coming out of her mouth, but they made no sense. The betrayal was incomprehensible. It felt like everything I had believed in was being shattered right in front of me. She continued to explain, her voice trembling. "His name is Greg. He's a coworker. It started a few months ago when we went out after work for drinks. It wasn't anything serious at first. Just friendly, you know? But then one night he kissed me and I didn't stop him. I felt guilty right away, but I didn't tell you. I should have, but I didn't. And then it just kept going. I was shaking with rage and disbelief. I couldn't wrap my head around it. How long has this been going on?" I demanded, my voice barely above a whisper, the pain choking me. It's been a few months, she said, her voice small, barely audible. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen. I love you. I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened. The words felt hollow, empty. I wanted to believe her, but the truth was already sinking in. She had been lying to me for months. Everything I had thought I knew about her, about us, had been a lie. She had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and I had no idea how to fix it. I asked her about the details, everything. She told me that the affair had started innocently enough, just a kiss, but it quickly escalated. She'd been spending more time with him, sneaking away during lunch breaks, meeting him after work. It became a routine, a pattern. They had sex a few times, she confessed. Her words were painful to hear, like knives digging into my chest. Why did you do it? I asked, my voice shaking with anger. What did I do wrong? I loved you. I trusted you. She didn't have an answer. All she could do was cry and beg me for forgiveness. She told me how much she loved me, how she regretted everything, how she couldn't believe she had done this to us. But it was too late. The trust was gone, and I knew it was something that couldn't be rebuilt overnight. I felt numb, like I was outside my body, watching everything unfold from a distance. I didn't know what to say, what to do. I didn't even know if I wanted to keep going in this relationship. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, rage, sadness, confusion, and even a deep sense of betrayal that I couldn't escape. I had given her everything. I had loved her with all my heart, and she had broken me. How could I ever look at her the same way again? Please, she begged, her voice barely above a whisper. Please don't leave me. I'll do anything. I'll fix this. Just give me a chance. But I couldn't. I couldn't fix it. No matter how hard she begged, no matter how many tears she shed, I knew that something irreparable had been done. I had to walk away. I left the house and drove around aimlessly, trying to clear my head. The image of her face, crying and pleading, wouldn't leave my mind. But I could make the decision for her. She had made her choice, and now I had to make mine. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. But what I did know was that I couldn't stay in this relationship as it was. Something had died, and it wasn't just the love I had for her. It was the person I had thought she was. I couldn't go back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. After I left, the weight of everything started to sink in. The night air felt too heavy, and I couldn't escape the constant buzzing in my head. What had just happened? I didn't know what to believe anymore. I kept replaying her words in my mind, her apologies, her tears. I love you. I didn't mean to hurt you. The words were familiar, comforting even, but they no longer had the same effect they once did. How could I ever trust her again? I drove aimlessly for what seemed like hours, my hands gripping the steering wheel with a kind of desperate energy, my thoughts spinning wildly. I had to stop myself from crying. It felt as though my entire life had been upended. I didn't even know who I was anymore. Was I the man who loved her and believed in our vows? Or was I someone else, someone betrayed and broken, lost in the aftermath of all the lies? I couldn't answer that. I finally pulled over in a quiet parking lot by a park, trying to calm myself down. I sat there for a while, staring out at the empty swings swaying in the night breeze. My mind wandered back to all the little signs I had ignored, things I should have noticed earlier. Things that now seemed so obvious, glaring at me from the past like flashing warning signs. I thought back to when I had worked that weekend shift, the one that kept me away from home for a few days. My wife had gone out with her friends, and I'd stayed in bed early that night, trying to rest. When I woke up, it was 4 a.m., and she still wasn't home. I wasn't the kind of person to jump to conclusions or question her every move, but something in the pit of my stomach told me that something wasn't right. I tried calling her, but there was no answer. I called again, panic starting to rise in my chest, but still no response. 30 minutes later, she called me back. Her voice was slurred, and she told me she'd been trying to hail a cab, but had no luck. Apparently, one of her friend's acquaintances had stopped to offer them a ride, but they had to stop by his house first. She assured me everything was fine, that she was just waiting for her friend, who had gone inside. But something about her story didn't sit right with me. When I picked her up, she was still acting strangely, like she was avoiding my gaze, unable to meet my eyes. I remember asking her why she didn't answer my calls, and she was defensive, saying she hadn't heard the phone ring, that she was too busy waiting and talking with the roommates. She seemed genuinely disgusted by the behavior of her friend, who had gone off with one of the guys and disappeared into a room. She even said she had cut the friend out of her life for good. I told myself that it was probably nothing, that maybe I was just being overprotective. But when she mentioned the guy they had met that night and how uncomfortable she felt, something didn't feel right about it. I didn't know it then, but those little red flags were the first sign that something deeper was wrong. I dismissed it as a fluke, but now, knowing everything I knew, I realized that was just the start of the cracks in our marriage. Then there was the time she went on a girls' trip to visit a friend in another city. She had planned the trip for weeks, excited to reconnect with old friends. I was happy for her. She deserved some time away. But that night, when she called me around 1 a.m. to say goodnight, something in her tone struck me. She was drunk, laughing about the girls' night they were having, but then I heard a man's voice in the background, loud and unmistakable. I asked her who it was, and at first, she denied hearing anything. Then she stammered, admitting that X had brought a couple of guys along. The way she brushed it off, her refusal to acknowledge the presence of the men until I confronted her, sent chills down my spine. I felt sick. Why didn't she tell me about them earlier? The trust one had in her began to erode even further. She promised me she wouldn't put herself in that kind of situation again, but I should have known better than to take her word at face value. It didn't take long for that promise to fade, as I now knew she'd been lying to me. She was in a relationship with someone else while I was away. The weight of the betrayal was crushing, and I couldn't bring myself to ignore the gut feeling I had been trying to silence for so long. As I sat in that parking lot, alone with my thoughts, everything came crashing down. I thought about the lies, the secrets, the moments I had excused because I believed in her. How had I let it get this far? Why hadn't I seen the signs? Why hadn't I trusted myself? I needed answers, and I needed them from her. But I couldn't talk to her yet, not until I had everything figured out in my head. I finally turned my truck around and headed home. The drive felt long, drawn out, every second dragging with the weight of everything I had just learned. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw her standing on the front porch, her arms wrapped around herself, pacing back and forth. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, and the sight of her almost made me feel pity, but that pity quickly turned to anger. She rushed to the door as soon as I got out of the truck, grabbing me by the sleeve and pulling me inside. Her eyes were wide, full of desperation, like she had been waiting for this moment for hours. "Please," she said, her voice trembling. "Please don't go. We need to talk. I'll tell you everything. Just don't leave." I didn't have it in me to speak. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and devastated by everything I had learned. I followed her inside, the air thick with tension. As I sat down, she sat across from me on the couch, her face pale, tear-streaked. She started talking, almost as if she had rehearsed it in her head, but her words kept faltering as she tried to explain everything. "Look," she started, her voice shaking. "I lied. The story I told you about the guy who tried to kiss me, it wasn't the whole truth." She paused, a long, painful silence filling the space between us. "We didn't just go for drinks. We went back to his place. The four of us, Karen, me, and these guys. We hooked up. I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you." I felt like the room had shrunk around me, like I couldn't breathe. Hearing her say it out loud was even worse than what I had imagined. The thought of her with someone else, physically with another man, was like a punch to the gut. My mind raced, but all I could do was sit there, numb, trying to process the confession that had just shattered my world. She continued, her voice breaking, her body shaking. "I never meant for it to go this far. We were just drunk. But then it happened again. And again. I don't know what to say. I was stupid. It was wrong, and I hate myself for it. I didn't know what to say." The pain was unbearable, and I couldn't seem to find words. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't listen to her. I had to get out of there. I stood up and walked toward the door, my hands trembling as I grabbed my jacket. She followed me, begging me to stay, to hear her out, to give her another chance. "Please don't leave me," she cried, her voice frantic. "I'll do anything. I love you. Please let me make it right." But I couldn't. I couldn't even look at her anymore without seeing the image of her in someone else's arms. I left, the sound of her pleas echoing in my ears as I walked away. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there with her anymore. I drove to the park again, sitting on the tailgate of my truck, trying to breathe. My mind was a mess, filled with questions that had no answers. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know if I should give her another chance, or if I should just walk away. The world felt like it was spinning out of control, and I had no idea how to stop it. As I sat there, lost in thought, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message from her. "Please come home. I need to explain everything. Don't leave me." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Not yet. I needed time. I needed space to think. My entire life had been turned upside down, and I didn't know how to put the pieces back together. But one thing was certain. I couldn't go back to the way things were. Days passed, but the weight of everything I had discovered, the painful truth of her infidelity, wouldn't leave me. Every attempt at finding clarity or closure seemed to spiral into a new wave of confusion and hurt. My thoughts were constantly consumed by the betrayal, by her lies, by the cruel way she had shattered the trust one had built my life on. I had gone through so many emotions, anger, sadness, disbelief, and still couldn't find peace. She kept calling. She kept texting. Every single time her name flashed on my phone screen, I felt a mix of dread and numbness. Her messages ranged from desperate pleas to emotional breakdowns. I had to mute my phone because I couldn't bear the constant reminders of what had happened. Eventually, I decided that I couldn't just let this go on. It wasn't healthy for either of us. I needed to see it through to the end, no matter how painful. I made the call to the lawyer. I made plans for counseling, but for me, I needed to heal, and I had to accept that healing might not come from saving my marriage. A few days later, I received a phone call in the late afternoon. It was Karen. She sounded frantic, breathless. "You need to come to the house. It's bad. I don't know what happened, but she's not okay. Please, hurry." A sense of dread washed over me. I didn't want to go back there, but I knew I couldn't ignore the call. Not now. Not when things had reached this point. I drove back to the house, my heart pounding in my chest. When I arrived, Karen was standing outside, pacing, her face pale. "She's inside," Karen said, her voice trembling. "She won't talk to anyone. She's been drinking. A lot. She won't even look at me. I don't know what to do. Please just go in there. She's falling apart." I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. I walked past Karen and into the house. The door was open, and I could hear her sobbing from inside. The sound of her cries sent a sharp pang through my chest, but I couldn't allow myself to feel pity. Not anymore. She was sitting on the floor in the living room, her body curled into a ball, her face hidden in her hands. Her clothes were disheveled, and there was a half-empty bottle of vodka on the table beside her. The smell of alcohol was thick in the air, almost overwhelming. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Why did you do it?" She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. She had barely slept, and there was a hollow look in her face, like she had already given up on herself. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The tears began to fall again, and all she could do was shake her head, as if she couldn't even comprehend the depth of the hurt she had caused. I'm sorry," she stammered, but her voice lacked conviction, like she was apologizing for the sake of it. I don't know what happened. I ruined everything. I ruined us. Please don't leave me." I stared at her, the anger still burning deep inside me. I had to fight the urge to shout, to scream at her for the devastation she had caused. But I knew that wouldn't help. Nothing could fix this. Nothing could undo the lies, the betrayal, the months of pain. Not anymore. I stepped closer, my voice calm but firm. "I don't think you understand. This isn't about us anymore. This is about you, about who you've become. I trusted you, and you threw it all away." She flinched at my words, her shoulders shaking as she cried harder. But she didn't argue. She didn't try to deny it anymore. It was as if she had given up completely on justifying her actions. "You don't know what it's like," she whispered between sobs. "You don't know the pressure, the loneliness. I was scared. I thought I was losing you. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I just wanted to feel, I didn't think I'd hurt you. I'm so sorry." I couldn't listen to her anymore. I had heard the same thing a dozen times before, and the words no longer held any weight. I turned to leave, but before I reached the door, she called out to me one last time. "Please," she begged, her voice breaking. "Don't leave me like this. I can't live with myself anymore." I froze at her words. There was something in her tone, something that made me hesitate for a split second. But I couldn't be swayed. I knew I had to walk away. "I'm not the one you need," I said, my voice soft but final. "You need help. You need to face what you've done, and I'm not the one who can fix it. You've ruined everything, and I can't save you anymore." I walked out of the house without looking back, the sound of her crying fading behind me. I left her with her regret, with the mess of her life and the destruction she had caused. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that her own personal torment was far deeper than I could ever understand. The next morning, Karen called me. Her voice was trembling, barely audible. "She's gone," Karen whispered. "She's gone, and it's my fault. I never should have let her drink like that. I never should have left her alone. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. What do you mean she's gone? I asked, my voice numb with disbelief. She overdosed. She took too many pills. I found her this morning. She didn't even leave a note. I don't know what to do. I'm so sorry. My heart sank. I stood there, the phone pressed to my ear, unable to move. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to scream, angry at her for what she had done, for how she had destroyed everything, for the way she had hurt me. But another part of me, a part that I didn't expect, felt empty, hollow, and sad. She had always been full of life, of warmth and laughter, of hope and dreams. To think that it had all ended like this, with a tragic final decision, was too much to bear. The anger, the hurt, the pain, it all seemed insignificant in that moment. I drove back to the house. The sirens were still blaring in the distance as I arrived. The police were there, along with paramedics who were trying in vain to revive her. But it was too late. She was gone. I stood in the doorway, watching the scene unfold before me, feeling nothing but an overwhelming sense of loss. In some way, I felt as though I had failed her. She had been drowning in her own despair, and I had walked away, thinking I was protecting myself, but in the end, I had left her to face it alone. The weight of that realization settled heavily on my chest, and for the first time since everything had begun, I felt completely broken. The funeral was small. There were only a few close friends and family members there, but it was painfully clear that the pain of her actions had reverberated far beyond what anyone had expected. She had left a wake of broken relationships, shattered lives, and broken hearts. As I stood by her grave, I realized that there was no such thing as a simple ending. Her tragic fate was a result of many choices. Choices she had made, choices I had made, and choices we had both made together. But in the end, it was clear that her struggle with herself had cost her everything. And though I was no longer angry, though I had no desire to seek vengeance or justice, I couldn't escape the weight of her choices and their consequences. I had lost someone I loved, but in her own way, she had lost herself long before she left this world. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe and hit notification bell to stay updated.